allow you to take in revenues from the ambulance service.
Correct.
Okay, and in those revenues, they include things like cash payments, insurance payments, we have hardship, Medicaid, all of that. So in there, looking at when we reviewed past ambulance service money, it was always somewhere in the neighborhood of 140,000 maybe, roughly, we were bringing in.
So we've been doing the service since 2007, so obviously we were running as a backup. Now we are the primary service, so obviously the more transports you do, the more money you bring in. So yeah, so it's, I think it's, like I said earlier, I think it's around 150 roughly right now in the current fiscal year that we've received in revenue from either insurances, Medicare, that's in the town's club.
Part of the
Yep.
Okay, so we've got this revenue stream coming in. Then we have to, what the thought process around this article was to exactly what someone stipulated earlier, was to self-fund the ambulance service.
Correct. I think Dave kind of summed it right up. The intent of it is that we would reduce the ambulance, what we budget every year in the operating budgets, out of the operating budget, and have it as a self-funding system. So revenues that come in fund the entire system from the operational side of things to capital expenditures, everything else. So in the CIP plan, we don't have to ever put money aside because that money's already there for the replacement of an ambulance or for the replacement of a $30,000 defib. So it was more of it was a fund to set up, basically self-fund the whole system itself. I think Dave kind of summed it up there.
Correct. And then just one more question. So then at that point, we would take whatever we budgeted, which I think was somewhere in the neighborhood of $140,000. I forget, Christine, tell me if I'm wrong. And that next year, we wouldn't be adding that to your budget. That would come out because we've got this self-funded ambulance service.
Exactly. So next fiscal year, that would be removed from my operating budget, which would reduce the operating budget, and it would operate off revenues collected.
Correct. And the impact of reducing your budget would be what on the taxpayer?
It's roughly $75,000, $80,000, I believe, in my current operating budget right now.
But it would be
a reduction
on the taxpayer, correct? Because we now have a self-funding ambulance service.
Correct. It's kind of like what Diane does in the highway at the transfer
Exactly.
station. Money comes into an account. Yep, it comes into an account, and then I think there's $700,000 there right now to pay for the packers that we just approved.
Okay, thank you. That helped me understand.
Now, you say self-funded. My question is, I mean, I would expect one EMT to cost you, fully burdened with pension and medical and all that, $72,000. If you're running 24/7 coverage, that's got to take 4 or 5 EMTs. And if you have some, what's in the expense side of this thing? You're talking about the revenue side for 175, but I can't believe that you're talking 72,000 on the expense side. What are you going to take out of the fund?
Basically, what we budget right now, in the operating budget, I believe everybody had that, is expenses for billing. We have a contracted service with billing. We have stuff in there for fleet maintenance. We have stuff for medical supplies. So all of that stuff is currently in the budget, which is the $79,000 to $80,000 currently. So that would be coming out of the fund. That is currently what's everything's budgeted now, and then any remaining funds would just stay in the fund with council approval to spend on future capital expenditures, future equipment, stuff like that. There is an overtime in there to keep shifts at minimal staffing for the ambulance, but no full-time salaries, no.
Dick Sullivan, Morgan Drive. First thing I'd like to do is to thank the chief for thinking outside the box, which lots of us encourage our operators and the government to do. Several years ago, we had to rely on some outside services, which we paid for, to come deliver this service to us, that we can spend something. This gentleman has been creative enough to give us an approved service operated by our professionals. We don't have to worry about how certified is the guy in that truck that picks us up. We know there are people. We take Blue Cross Blue Shield money, other insurance companies' money, and put it in a pot, and it doesn't cost us a nickel. And I think he needs to be supported heavily in making this operation go. Now, if we have, part of the reason I'm concerned about this is that I can move rapidly to my dotage. I'm going to need these services. I'm very happy to have the chief, one of his qualified people, come take care of me. I'm not so sure about the guy who may or may not have qualified EMT training. He's doing this and he's getting a big pile of money. And some of us don't want him to have the money. He's going to need another ambulance. He's going to pay more people. He can do that out of his funds that he gets from other people. Yay for him. I don't understand what's going on here. He has been very creative. He's taken what used to be a cost. He's built a profit-making business out of it in our interest. I'd ask everybody to remember that. In our interest. And it's not on the tax rate. I think he deserves a raise.
Pam Auger, Casey Drive. I would urge everyone to vote against this amendment, or article as amended. If I remember correctly, several years ago, the legislative body voted that they didn't want independent ambulance service, and yet we have one anyway. They want to take twice the amount of the operating cost they're earning. They want to take that, put it back into the operation. It's going to get pretty big after time if we don't have any oversight on that. And I would urge you to vote no.
Chuck Labonte, Lindsay Road. Questions, I guess maybe for the chief. You're running an ambulance service 24/7 for less than $80,000 a year.
Correct. A lot of people are frustrated, a lot of people are frustrated.
I guess I'm just not buying that. $80,000 to have an ambulance service going 365 days a year. Because basically what you get here is one salary, correct? Of $47,500.
It's not a salary, it just covers to keep them in staffing. Two staffing for
Can we have the chief come up
Come on up,
and
Chief.
share his
Yeah.
answers?
Yes, so there's no salaries. It's just to keep a minimum staffing number at 7, which we're filling that shift, or filling shifts to 7.
So
If we had no fire department, we would have no ambulance, correct?
I guess I don't understand what you're. So you want, I guess you're correct. One means that right from me down, everybody's cross-trained to be 500 ATs. So when this service was established, it was established with impact fees. A lot of money out of impact fees, which established 2 ambulances, the equipment and all that. This, and that's why we got into this service very reasonable, if that makes sense to you there. So basically everything that's in there right now is just more the operational costs of running the service.
Okay, but also in that running the service involves firemen that are paid out of a different budget.
Currently, yeah, they're all out of the fire department operating budget. There's 3 divisions in my budget: the fire department operating budget, the forestry, and then the ambulance. Yes.
So if we make the ambulance service its own entity, using the revenues from the ambulance service, will those revenues pay salaries?
It will pay everything that's outlined in the ambulance budget currently. Correct, there's three different divisions here. You have the operating budget and the ambulance and the forestry. So everything that's currently budgeted here would be paid through the fund, along with any future capital expenditures.
I guess the point I'm trying to get to is what the other gentleman brought up. It's like, it's not really an ambulance service for $80,000 a year. We're also subsidizing that with paid firemen's salaries. And, you know, it kind of looks on paper that an $80,000 department is bringing in $150,000 and that there's profits there, but there really isn't. And so I have to say, if we're using resources from across the department, then we shouldn't compartmentalize one little part of it and make it look like it's profitable.
David Pearl, 79 Main Street. Hooksett is a town, and I think we should remain a town. Every time we try to go into business, I don't think it serves the purpose of what you're supposed to do. We don't elect you to create businesses, to create revenue for our town. We are supposed to provide services for our town through taxation that meet needs that may not be able to be met in other ways. Perfect example was when we were going to do the plowing of the school. It was going to be a wash. It didn't turn out that way because what the gentleman just mentioned is true. You can't look at the cost without factoring in the extra cost of the employees, their training, and all of that kind of stuff. So to try to set that aside and say it's self-sustaining, it's not true. And it can't be true. And if you went out and got a bid on that same service, it would be much higher because they're paying the salaries and benefits of all of those people to be there all of the time. And I think this is where we get into the problem. We should provide services for our town through taxation or fees, if need be. But we shouldn't look at it as a business enterprise. It leads us down the wrong road. I feel that we already have with our water precincts and our other entities in this town, that they start claiming their budgets, their salaries, and we have no control over it because they set their rates. I don't think that we should be in the business of business. I think we should be here to provide services for people in Hooksett. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on Article 18? Seeing none. The exercise of futility. All in favor of putting Article 18 on the ballot as amended, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Meeting doesn't like it. It's still going on the ballot. As amended. As amended.